This video will teach you how to budget and includes a tutorial on creating and maintaining a personal but professional budget to the standards that a business would take. So we're going to look at why a budget is important first of all. It's important to track your spending as it helps you realize where your money is going without any guesswork at all. So if you've ever got to the shops and say, well, how much money do I have? Or got to the end of a month where you're kind of thinking, all right, well, where did my money go? I kind of lost track of maybe $100 or $200 here or there. And obviously that's an issue. So we're taking that guesswork out, making sure you know exactly where every dollar is going. When you know where your money is going, you can more easily make changes to your budget and make the right decisions in your spending. So when you go to the shops or you get a bill or you're making plans to spend some money, you're going to know exactly how much you have available, and you're going to know that it won't impact you negatively if you do spend that money, because you're going to have all of the information that you need and you're just making that decision. Is this product valuable or not? You know that it's not going to impact your budget, and basically what will happen there is you can say yes or no. When you come across a product that is out of your price range, you'll know that straight away, so you can instantly just say no and look for a cheaper alternative. Fortunately these days there's so many cheap alternatives for almost anything. It's always good to look for cheaper alternatives as long as the quality is there. When you have your finances under control, there's no need to feel anxious about upcoming bills or expenses. You already have everything in place. For example, if you get the rego bill, it might be $400 to $600, and you're sitting there thinking, oh, where did that come from? I wasn't expecting it. A budget will eliminate that, because you know when things are coming, you know that you have money set aside for those things, and you can simply pay the bill and move on with your life. It doesn't have to be a high pressure, high stakes situation. If you know exactly where every dollar is going, you know where your bills are going to show up, and obviously that's going to have a massive impact on your life. You're not going to get random bills and be like, oh, that really hurts right now. You know it's coming, just prepare for it. I want to quickly brush over the profit and loss statement. Often this is a report that a business would use to monitor spending throughout the month or the quarter or the year. It outlines how much money is coming in and how much money is going out. That's basically all there is to a profit and loss statement. What's coming in, what's coming out. It's quite a simple tool, and it's very easy to see where you end up at the end of the period. I think for a personal budget, it's good to look at things on a monthly basis, because you're getting a good enough span to look over a good period, but it's not so long that you can really blow the budget. So a profit and loss statement is often measured against a budget that you would actually create. A budget is something that you're expecting to happen, whereas a profit and loss is the actual dollars spent, and often they're categorized into, so for example, your income might come from employment, it might also come from hobby and investment. So there's obviously a range of different income types that you might have depending on your situation. And then obviously you've got your expense column. Basically that tracks everything that you spend. So for example, you probably got a phone bill, you've probably got internet costs, food, rent, that kind of thing. A profit and loss will show you in a summary how much you've actually spent. So at the end of the period, what you're looking for is you want some net profit. So you as a person, obviously you're not a business, but even as a person, you want to be profitable. You want to be a profitable person. And in the profit and loss statement, you're going to see at the end of each period whether you get a net profit or a net loss. A P&L, which is short for profit and loss, is a really good way to track how you're actually progressing through each period that you're tracking. For example, if your income is $1,000 and you spend $850, that means your net profit would be $150 at the end of that period. So for example, if you were a business your profit would be $150. And there's no reason you shouldn't treat yourself in that way in terms of tracking and making a budget and recognizing your finances. Okay, so let's talk about income. This is the top part of the profit and loss. So this is where it adds up everything that's coming in for you that you could potentially spend. So just like sales in a business, sales often reflect success. So the more revenue or sales that you're drawing in, so whether that's in your personal life, from income, hobbies, investment, anything really, the more income coming in, the more that you can potentially spend, and driving that income higher should be a priority if your income is quite low. That's the first step in doing a budget, is obviously recognizing where you are right now, but also making that shift towards gaining more money and more income. And there's a few ways that we can do that, which we'll cover later. Income basically sets the limit for your spending. Now, while you can collect debt and add to your expenses beyond what you're getting, the income really shows where you should be sitting in terms of your spending. If you're spending more than your income for that period, it's going to create an issue long term. So it's really good to get on top of that as soon as you notice that your profit and loss is at a net loss at the end of each period. You really want to avoid that. If it does happen, which it can from time to time, and that's okay, but you need to obviously make some adjustments, have a look at what you've actually spent. Once you've found what that issue is, then obviously go and make the reductions where you can. Or on the flip side, because income is a priority, increasing that income. So looking for ways to either increase your wage, improve your assets, or do some education to hopefully down the track get a job that will pay a little bit more. So the whole idea of the income section is basically for it to be higher than the expenses for that period. Talking about increasing your income, there's a couple of things I would like to cover just to help you get an idea of what might be important for you or not. So when we look at the cost of education, sometimes degrees and things like that might increase your income are quite large. They're quite expensive. Even if it's say a business or whatever that you're spending, it might be a property. The main thing that you need to look at is really the future income that it will bring you. So for example, if you have a course that costs $50,000, but the increase to your income is going to be $25,000 every single year from the date of completion, then in the space of 2 years, you make 100% of that investment back, and then you've got your whole working life from that 2 years onwards will be effectively profit compared to the cost of that education or that asset. Now, businesses are obviously in a similar situation. So if you buy a business, let's say it's $200,000, you might earn a profit of $100,000 in your first year. On the second year, obviously that next $100,000 would be paying the full amount or 100% return on the investment. And then every future year would be effectively profit. So future income, you never really want to spend something straight up, but assessing the future income that you can derive is really a really good way to look at things and say, okay, well, if I do spend this $50,000, in 2 years, will I be better off? Or even 5 or 10 years, depending on your time horizon. But it's really important to look to the future, not to the impact that it's going to have now so much, because the further you get ahead now, the further that these things and changes that you make are going to have such a positive impact. Let's say you didn't start any study or do anything investment-wise for 5 years. that whole 5-year period could have been a massive growth section for you, and then potentially you've missed it. So it's really important to get stuck into that side of things now. So we've covered income. Now let's look at the expense area. So profit and loss, you've got income at the top, expenses are generally beneath that. And what we're looking at is all of the costs that you have for that particular period. And obviously we want the expenses to be lower than the income that we've derived for that period. When you're doing your budget, it's really important to include annual costs and one-offs. Think of things like registration, electricity bills, birthday presents, events throughout the year. If you go camping once or twice a year, add those costs in, because that's really important to not get to those points where you haven't budgeted in and obviously you're trying to scramble up the cash. When you're doing your budget, it's really important to consider every expense that you'll have throughout the whole year. You don't want to be that person that says, oh, I didn't think of that, and then I've gotten all these bills and I can't go to this event that I really wanted to go to. If you know that there's going to be maybe 2 to 5 events that you are going to attend that year, and generally at an event you might spend $100 to $500, you really want to plan these things in so that when the time comes, you have everything that you need and there's no shocks. This kind of planning in your budget really takes the pressure off you financially throughout the year, because you can really structure yourself and make decisions so much easier if you know exactly what you need to do for that whole period. A lot of these things you really know they're coming, so it's really good to just get ready for it and have it all planned. So that's the beauty of getting your budget sorted early on and trying to stick to it as best you can. We're not perfect, but obviously it's something that's really important to get done well. One thing I like to do with expenses is add an area which I generally call miscellaneous. In that area, I create part of the budget where sometimes things come up where you have to spend money. It doesn't really fit into your normal categories, but it's something that you're generally going to come across from time to time. It's really important to add something, a bit of a buffer to your budget, so that if you do better than expected, you'll just have more net profit, but you're not going to get caught up in under budgeting and making things too strict. If you make things too strict, they're going to be really hard to stick to every single day. So you've got to have a bit of a buffer for those times where you do have things come up or you want to spend some more money. You're still a human, you still got to have fun. Things come up, that's life. But just plan for it. Be ready for those types of things and you won't get caught out. So why use a budget app? Obviously we can create a free budget using something like Excel. If you head over to my website, you can definitely download a free version of a spreadsheet that will track all of your spending and income and effectively be a pretty good budget. But using a budgeting app is so much easier. It's the easiest way to budget that I know of. You'll feel more in control of your money in your life, and long-term results will be visible to you, and you'll see your improvements over time. Now this is because the app itself can track everything. It will store all the information for your spending over a long period of time, so you can go back and see where you were going wrong, and you'll have so much data to learn more about yourself and your spending habits. That way, as you move forward, you can make slight changes and you can make adjustments to make sure that you're hitting your targets and gaining more success for yourself. When you use a budgeting app, you'll gain a valuable skill by professionally managing your finances. Doing a personal budget versus looking after a business's financial accounts isn't too much different. Really, you're still gaining an income from services that you provide, and you're spending money to keep yourself operating, just like a business does. And the more you practice this type of thing and you see patterns in your spending, it's really going to give you a good skill for life. You're going to know where money's going in, know where money's going out. It's going to help your organization It's actually going to take your focus off money, because you know at the back of your mind and your subconscious that it's all sorted. You've already got it planned out. You don't need to think about it because it's already done. So you can go and live your life, do the things you need to do when you're not doing your budget. Another great thing about using a budgeting app is that it's actually really quick. So everything gets imported directly from your bank account, all the information, so that you can simply allocate the information that you need to the right accounts. And then all you do is at the end of each period, once you've allocated all your transactions, you look at your profit and loss statement and see how you went. It's really that easy. Another great thing about using a budgeting app is if you are out and about, you can easily check your budget by checking where you stand. And that way, when you're out and about, at the shops or whatever you're doing, you'll know exactly what you can afford. One of the things I really like about having a budget and knowing where your money's going is that you don't need to feel guilty about spending. So many people go out and they'll buy something and they'll feel guilty for it. But if you've planned that into your budget already, then there's no need to feel guilty. You know it's coming, it's just a part of life. And as long as it's within those budget guidelines, then there's no issues with it. So it'll really take the pressure off you when you're actually spending it. We've seen accountants, the perception of accountants is that they have plenty of money. But what I like to think is it really their income that is good? Or is it actually their ability to control finances and take that financial pressure off so they can make better decisions? Doing a personal budget will really help you to look after your finances like an accountant, because basically all they're doing is just understanding where the money is going and making subtle changes. You can definitely do it. You've just got to obviously get the app, set your transactions up. Even if it's wrong, if your expenses are going somewhere in the expenses area and your income's going somewhere in the income area, doesn't matter if it's wrong too much. You'll learn as you go, but you'll see the overall figure and you'll get better at it over time. So once you've actually got your budgeting app set up, you'll be able to budget easily. You'll be able to track everything that you're doing, and you'll know exactly how to deal with your finances every single day. It's almost impossible for unexpected expenses to slip through when you've got a budgeting app. Now this is because you see everything coming through and it has a description, and you actually have to consciously allocate that to an account. So for example, if you see an expense for a restaurant, but you know that you don't eat out, you'll go and look at that transaction and say, well, did I actually spend that? And potentially somebody's taken your card or spent money that you weren't aware of, spent your money. And obviously you can go and check out that transaction and say, hey, look, this wasn't mine, I didn't spend this money. And obviously that sort of thing can be looked into further or reversed or whatever needs to be done. The same is true for subscriptions. So if you sign up to, say 5 subscriptions and you look at it later and say, do I really need that? A lot of people just let things go. But if you're having to allocate that transaction every single month, you'll start to think, is that valuable enough for me to be paying this amount every single month? Because it's there, you're being able to see it every single month, how much it's costing you, where it could go to benefit your life if you wanted to spend more money elsewhere. The great thing is at the end of each month, you've got your profit and loss. You look at your budgeting app and say, okay, well, I'm spending this much on maybe eating out. You could have an extra $200 there, and you can consciously sit there and say, okay, well, if I had $200 more every single month and I stopped eating out, what would I do with that money? So you can start to look at things in more detail and say, okay, if I shift money from here to here, it might be into more investments, it might be into looking after yourself a little bit more. Could be really anything that's important to you, but you can physically see the amounts that you're spending, and you can easily adapt that and say, well, I can spend less here and it won't affect me too much, but the money would be better spent in some other area. And the budgeting app makes that possible. And obviously no more guessing where your money is going. You'll see the exact figures when you need them. So you can open it up on your phone, say, all right, how much do I have? And then you can go shopping guilt-free. We're about to jump over to the tutorial now, but before we do that, I just want to run over a couple of budgeting steps that we're going to do. So the first one is to write down all of the categories or things that you will buy throughout the year. So that might be food, bills, travel, anything that you can think of that you'll spend money on. Write it all down. Doesn't have to be the amounts just yet, but just the categories or the names of those groups of expenses that you're going to have throughout the year. So pause the video now if you want to go do that now while it's at the top of your mind. Write it all down just on a piece of paper because you'll need that for later. The second step is to create your budget. So we're going to go over how to actually do that in the tutorial shortly. And it's just using the categories that you've written down and then allocating an amount and a frequency and then saving that. Once you've saved it to the budgeting app, it will automatically be there in your reports. Step 3 will be to link your bank accounts to the budgeting app. So we'll go over in the tutorial how to actually do that as well. But when you go to the premium option, it will automatically feed everything through once your accounts are linked. Then, step 4, all you have to do is allocate those transactions to the categories that you've created. And finally, you'll just need to review your P&L or your income and expense statement, as we'll go over shortly, because that's where all of your data is. And the actual power in budgeting is looking at your actual results and making adjustments, making sure you're not going over in certain places where you shouldn't be, and just adapting your future expenses based on that data and trying to do your best to have some more savings and obviously allocate that money into better places. So your P&L or your income and expense statement will show everything that you need so that you can make those decisions effectively. We'll duck over to the tutorial now. Okay, so when you click on the link below, it will take you to a page that looks something like this. As you can see, all of the features that they talk about. So what we will do is go plans and pricing, or pick a plan, either one. Now, what I've actually chosen for me personally is the premium option. Now that's obviously about $11 per month. But what it does is it actually brings in the bank feeds automatically. So because I really like to get this done quickly and easily, I've chosen this option. So if you're the same as me and you want to do a budget at a much easier level, you can just go get premium. You can start off on the basic if you like, but it is manual imports and it is a bit of a pain, particularly if you're not that great at computers. It is a bit of a pain to actually import all of your transactions, and to do that every month will take a lot more effort compared to when you do the premium, because when it's automatically in there, you really just have to jump into the system, allocate your transactions, and then you're pretty well done. Whereas with this, it takes a lot more commitment and a lot more effort to actually stick to it long term. So while you're motivated now, you may not be in 2 to 3 months time potentially. So premium option takes that pressure off, and I think for $11 per month to potentially save myself, I might save myself maybe even $100 per month just knowing where my money's going and being accountable to that and being able to see those numbers each month at the end of that period it really does make a difference. So that $11, yes, it's an expense, but it does help quite a bit in managing your finances easily. So I'm going to jump forward here. I'm going to sign in, but when you go get premium, for example, it'll just ask for a username, email address, and you create a password. Set your time zone, choose your billing, and obviously you've got to put in your details there and accept the terms to create your account. Obviously, if you're not comfortable with that just yet, that's fine. You can just go get free, same details here, and accept the terms to create your account. So I'm over at the sign in page. I'm just going to sign in. This is all I do when I go to do my accounts every now and then. And it's going to log me in. So I'm just going to quickly jump over to the profit and loss, or the P&L. That's the most important kind of feature of this budgeting software. So if we click on budgets and reports, we'll go income and expense, which is effectively a profit and loss in business terms or accounting terms. We're just going to have a look. So we've got here a column that says budgeted. We've got a column here that says actual. So I've created a budget for all of these figures here. I'll just close that off. So for example, I know that I spend money on fuel every single month. I've put a budget in here. Unfortunately, I have gone over that because it is holiday times. I've done a lot of driving this month. I've got a series of other expenses. And you can see here that I've also got a miscellaneous costs area, just to make sure that every now and then I will spend some money on something that I'm not really planning on for the year, but I know there's things like that throughout the year, so I've budgeted a certain amount for that. As you can see, you've got all of these expenses. So you've got a total expense, which shows how much you've actually budgeted for and how much you've actually spent. Up here again, total income. For most people, it will just be the one line, unless you've got investments and other assets generating income. So for me, it's just the wage. We've got budgeted, we've got actual. One policy that accountants really stick by is the policy or convention of being conservative. So as you can see here, I've got my income set a little lower than what I actually expect. And you'll also see here, so I try and budget things a little higher than what I'm actually expecting. And down here you can see a net income amount. So that's what I've budgeted for each month, and that's what I've actually spent. So to navigate your month, generally you want to look at the previous month. You don't want to look at the current month because it's still in progress, unless you really need to check something. So to change your date, you click on the date up here and you click on last month, because the current month or this month is often not accurate until it's complete. So we'll go last month. That'll bring up a completed statement. Okay, so having a look at October, just to give you a good example of what you should be aiming for. We've got income budgeted as a little less than our actual income. because it's always okay to go over on the income side. That's always a plus. So we've gone a little bit under to stick with that conservative outlook. And we can see in our expenses, we've budgeted that our net income overall after our expenses will be about $21. But then when we've actually allocated everything into their appropriate column, we haven't spent as much as we have budgeted for, which is great. So our net income for October was about $378. As you can see here, we've budgeted for a total expense. However, our actual total expense is a little bit lower. So budgeted and actual. That's effectively all you're aiming for, is to be positive in your budget and then to go under budget if you can. From time to time, things will not be the same. They won't be that way, and it might be negative. But as long as the majority of the time you're going forward, that's the main thing. And as you get better and better with managing your finances, you'll find that more often than not, your net income will actually be higher than what you've budgeted, or it'll at least be improving from when you first start. So don't be too disheartened if you're behind the 8 ball. Don't sort of hide transactions or delete things or try and make it different, because you're only really fooling yourself. You want real data, and if you see improvements month over month, that's really going to give you a boost so that you can stick with it and keep improving in your life. We'll jump over to the budget area, and I'm just going to show you how to create a budget. So we'll go new budget, choose a category. So let's call it bills. And we know that we have $500 or $250 in expenses. It repeats every month. So we know that we're going to spend $250 on bills every month. We want to start that at the 1st of next month. If there is an end date to the budget, you can pop that in. But generally, things like bills are just ongoing. So it's quite unlikely that you're going to stop that. When it comes to forecasting your accounts, you can actually set this to where your bills come out of. So I've got a bills account, so I'll allocate the bills expense in the budget to the bills account. And that way, when this budgeting app runs a forecast, it will be able to estimate in this $250 into its forecast. I generally tick everything as a bill because it makes the profit and loss or income and expense statement much cleaner, and it's much easier to read each month. And then all you do, obviously you can set a color here, but you can just hit save, so it will add that to your income and expense budget area. So for example, if I did the same thing with phone for $95 each month, that's what would show up. It just shows up as an expense that we're expecting. And just to show you how that works into the future so that you can kind of forecast what you're expecting, I'll apply a custom range. Of 1 month. So this is into the future. And as you can see here, We've got budgeted and actual again. Now, because this is in the future, we haven't actually spent any money for this period, but you can see that our budget is outlined already. So we know that during this month, our total expenses might be somewhere around 5,000. Giving us a net income expected, even though all of these are zero. So this is a great way to plan for the month ahead. So rather than trying to think, what have I got on this month? If you add everything to a budget, then it will show up and you can plan for the future much easier. So for example, new budget, automotive expenses, we're going to add in some rego here, so we'll call it 750, and this happens once a year, and we're going to get our rego on the 3rd of March. We pay it from our bills account. It is a bill. And basically that just sets it as a one-off payment in March rather than dividing that through each month. So 750 divided by 12, that would be showing you that amount each month rather than just once if you didn't tick this box. Because we know that this is a once-off payment, we just tick that box, and then that way we know in March that we're expecting to have a payment go out of $750, and then we could just save that. And you can do the same with electricity, holidays, anything that you're expecting throughout the year. Now, the way I have grouped my budgets, obviously I've got my income, I've got my necessities. So these are things like fuel. I need fuel to get to work. I've got to pay my mortgage so that I have a house. I've got to pay bills, any loans that I have. Generally, I need a phone for work anyway, insurances. All of these types of things go in the necessities section. So I've actually grouped them. I'll show you how to group in a second. Now, I've actually also got an extras column or group, and that's things like home improvement, service fees, personal and shopping, travel, eating out. So all types of things that if I didn't spend them, it's not going to hurt me. But obviously I've got to plan in every expense that I'm expecting. So that all goes into the extras, things that can generally wait for me to have the money available. They're all budgeted into the extras. Obviously I've got a fun account there too, a business account. So at the moment, business costs are very low and they're not a necessity every single month, but I've still budgeted a section. So these three areas are quite important. They're the main areas that sort of group in the budget. So I've created a budget for each section of those. And when I go to the income and expense, it just lists each thing in each of those areas. So obviously I've got fuel, bills, car. It lists all of that into the one area. So let's say I want to add investments to the extras section. I'll click the down arrow on the extras, scroll down a little. I'll click on the little grabber dots to the side, and I'll add this into the extras drop down section. As you can see, that grey line has actually joined in investment, and that is now a part of the extras budget. If I want to remove that, I can click it on the little grabber area, and I'll just drop it away from this grey line here, so that it basically says that's not a part of the extras. So each time you create a new budget section, it will fall down into this area, and that way you can set it into your sections. So for myself, I've added 3 main sections. One is income, the other is things that I need, and the other is things that I want. So necessities, anything that generates an income or more money or survival, so keeping myself going. And then anything that's extra, such as entertainment, buying things, eating out, things that I don't necessarily need. This actually makes it much easier to target. If you're going over budget, often it's because of your extras. So if you pull your extras back in, it just makes it so much easier to have a look and say, okay, well, I'm eating out way more than I should, or I'm spending way too much on online services or shopping, whatever it is. It's often the extras that will be costing you more because you're basically, hooking into the expenses that you don't need but you want. Because a lot of the time your necessities are fairly capped. There's only so much you can spend on the majority of these things without going overboard. Whereas the extras, shopping, you can spend as much as you like. Eating out, obviously, while it's capped, it can be quite expensive compared to just groceries. So it just helps break things up into a much easier setting so that you can easily reduce costs when you need to. As you can see up the top, you've got the income budget and you've got the expense budget in just a big total. Don't worry too much about the numbers and things on the side. Really, as long as your income and expense looks right. So during a period of a month, did you expect to spend, say, $200 on fuel? Are your bills $400 abouts? If these are wrong, jump back into your budget and just check the numbers. So you can actually edit. So we'll check our fuel. And what we can do is obviously see where we've actually spent more. This is quite advanced, don't worry about all of this stuff unless you really want to. It's not too important. But you can go up, edit the budget, click on this, and you can obviously change when it starts, set the frequency, set how much, all of those types of things, and then you can update it. Now you might notice that this hasn't been ticked. Now because it's on a fortnightly basis, it's about $80. It doesn't have to be exact, and it will just spread it out through the period of the income and expense, and that's okay. So just setting up your budget how you want it so that it's usable for you. You don't have to do everything that I've said. The most important thing is that you're looking after yourself in terms of knowing where your money's going and what you're expecting to spend. We'll just jump back over to dashboard. Now when we've got items or new expenses to categorize, we go dashboard, categorize however many items that you've got to put into their allocation. and all you do is select the category. So for example, I purchased a diary yesterday for the new year. So I'm going to put that into personal and shopping. It already brings up the date and the amount, and save and continue. This was a travel expense. So again, I click on underneath category, and I type in the category that I have created, and I go save and continue. This was again travel, save and continue. This was eating out in restaurants. So as you type, obviously the items that you have already created come up. But if I wanted to create a new category, as I type, it will create an option here to actually create a new category. So if I was to click that, I would also have a new category there, but we don't want to do that. We'll just hit save and continue. Eating out again. This was most likely coffee, which I put to eating out. Doesn't have to be exact, guys. It's really just about getting it as accurate as you can, so that at the end of the month you can have a look over everything. This was eating out as well. Eating out again. There's a lot of food here. Basically what you can do is realize these transactions as you're seeing them come back through. You can see you're spending a lot on coffee, you're spending a lot on food, and you can easily go and say, all right, I'm going to hold off on that. I'm really going to stop spending money on those areas. While your subconscious understands that you're probably spending money on those things, going back through it like this and seeing it over and over again really gives you a good idea of where your money is going and just reinforces that. So once you've done all of your transactions, you'll see a page like this, and you will be able to go to your budgets and reports, income and expense report, and the numbers will be added to whatever period that you were looking at. So guys, just to recap, the important report that you need to check each month is the income and expense. Creating your budgets is really important at the start, because that will set everything up for you. When you are creating your budget, you can just type into, let's say, food. You can create a category called food, type in how much, and obviously go through all of these steps quite easily. Now, what I would suggest is writing everything down first. So on a piece of paper, go through everything that you expect for a week, and then a month, a quarter, and then annually. Write it all down, each category that you might expect, and then go through your budget, just so that you try not to miss anything. And then obviously you can create a group so that you can more easily track what types of things and what type of expenses that you're going to have. And it just makes it a little bit easier to budget. Now, I'm also going to show you how to add a bank feed, add a new bank feed, and then we can connect to a new bank. There's a series of banks here that you can click on, or you can search for your own. And then obviously what it will do is basically take you to log in to your own bank and set everything up. That way, once you've completed that, all of your transactions will come through automatically. There'll be a button here for any uncategorized transactions. You simply click on that and categorize them. That will then pre-fill everything for your income and expense area. And if you've created a budget already, you'll see all of the numbers for your budget, and you'll see all of your categorized transactions. Now you can also look at things like a whole quarter. Now as that loads, it will show you all of the information for an entire quarter of how you've actually went. So when you get to the end of the financial year, so we'll say last financial year, you can actually go through, look at how much you've earned, look at how much you've spent over the whole year at the click of a button. It's a really useful tool. It's all at your fingertips. You can just click your button, you see how well you've done, or you can see the areas that you need to improve on. That's it for today. Thanks so much for watching. Best of luck with all of your budgeting needs, and if you have any questions, feel free to pop them down in the comments and I'll do my best to get back to you.